In Thailand, hidden deep within the ancient forests, there are stories that have been passed down for generations. Stories about spirits that do not appear in cities. They do not walk among crowds. They wait where humans rarely go, among the mountains, beneath the endless trees, and inside the forgotten caves of the jungle. One of the most mysterious legends tells of a creature known as the one-legged spirit, a small and terrifying being with a strange body, a single powerful leg, long arms, and a mouth said to be sharp like the mouth of a mosquito. According to old beliefs, this creature does not attack people without reason. It follows those who take something that does not belong to them. Some villagers believe that deep inside the forest, the spirit hides ancient treasures, gold, forgotten objects, things left behind by people from another time. But there is one warning that every old hunter knows. Never take anything from the forest that the forest did not give you. Because once you carry something that belongs to the jungle, the forest may follow you home. This is the story of Prasert, an experienced hunter, a man who never believed in ghost stories, until one rainy night, deep inside a forbidden forest in Thailand, he discovered something that should have remained hidden forever. Prasert had spent more than 20 years walking through the forests of Thailand. He knew the language of the jungle. He knew the direction of the wind. He knew the footprints of animals. And he knew how to survive when the forest became dangerous. To him, the jungle was not a place of ghosts. It was a place of nature, a place ruled by animals, weather, and human mistakes. Many villagers told stories about spirits hiding among the trees. They warned him about places where people disappeared. They warned him about voices heard at night. They warned him about strange creatures that watched travelers from the darkness. But Prasert always smiled. A person who fears every shadow will never survive in the forest. That was what he always said. He believed every strange sound had an explanation. Every strange footprint belonged to an animal. Every old legend was simply a story created by people who did not understand the world around them, until the day he entered the deepest part of the forest and discovered something that would challenge everything he believed. The journey began during the rainy season, a time when the forests of Thailand become both beautiful and dangerous. The trees grow thicker, the rivers become stronger, and paths that were once familiar can disappear within hours. But for hunters like Prasert, this was the best time to enter the jungle. Animals moved more frequently, fresh tracks appeared along the muddy ground, and the deep forest became alive with sounds that disappeared during the dry season. Early that morning, Prasert left the village carrying only what he needed: a rifle, a knife, a small backpack, and years of experience. He was searching for wild animals deep in the mountains, a journey he had made many times before. He walked through narrow trails covered by fallen leaves. He crossed small streams flowing between ancient trees. He followed footprints hidden beneath the wet soil. Everything felt normal, until the weather changed. Dark clouds slowly covered the sky. The wind became colder, and the peaceful forest was suddenly interrupted by the sound of heavy rain. The storm arrived faster than expected. Within minutes, Prasert was completely soaked. He searched for shelter. Not far ahead, between the trees and the thick mist, he noticed a dark opening in the side of a mountain, a cave. He hesitated for a moment. Experienced hunters knew that unknown caves could be dangerous. They could hide wild animals, unstable rocks, or places where a person could easily become trapped. But the storm continued to grow stronger, so Prasert stepped inside. The moment he entered, the sound of the rain became distant.
The cave was cold, dark, and strangely quiet. His flashlight moved slowly across the stone walls, old rock formations, water dripping from the ceiling, marks left behind by time. At first, it looked like an ordinary cave, but then something caught his attention. Deep on the cave wall were ancient carvings. Prasert moved closer.
The symbols were difficult to understand, but one image appeared clearly. Small, strange figures, standing on only one leg. Around them, a large wooden chest. Prasert stared at the carving. He had never seen anything like it before. Probably just an old legend, he whispered. He continued deeper into the cave. The passage became narrower. The air became colder. Then, his flashlight revealed something hidden beneath fallen rocks. A wooden chest. Not a broken chest. Not an empty one. A chest that had survived years, maybe even centuries. Thick iron bands covered the old wood. Strange symbols were carved across the lid. The same symbols he had just seen on the cave wall. For a long moment, Prasert simply stood there. His instincts told him to leave it alone, but another voice inside him asked a different question. What could be inside? He looked around. The cave was silent. No one was there. No one would ever know. Slowly, he reached toward the chest. Then he stopped. The words of old hunters came back to his mind. The forest gives many things, but not everything you find belongs to you. Prasert pulled his hand away. For a moment, he almost walked away. But curiosity and the small voice of temptation were stronger. He opened the chest. The ancient hinges released a deep sound, as if the cave itself had awakened. Inside, something reflected in the light. Gold, ancient ornaments, forgotten treasures, objects hidden away from the world. Prasert had walked through this forest for 20 years, but he had never seen anything like this. And at that moment, a single thought entered his mind. Just one piece. He did not take the entire treasure. He did not empty the chest. He only reached inside and picked up a small golden pendant, the smallest thing he could find, the thing he believed would never matter. But he was wrong, because deep inside the forgotten cave, something had already noticed, and something was coming to take it back.
The rain stopped before sunset. The forest slowly became quiet again, but something about the silence felt different. Prasert stepped out of the cave carrying his backpack. The golden pendant was wrapped carefully inside a small piece of cloth. He told himself it was only an old object, a forgotten piece of history, something valuable, but harmless. He had taken only one thing, just one small piece from a forgotten chest. In his mind, that was not stealing. It was simply finding something that nobody had used for hundreds of years. At least, that was what he wanted to believe.
The journey back was slower than expected. The heavy rain had changed the forest. The familiar trails were covered with fallen leaves. Small streams had become deeper. The thick mist made it difficult to see far ahead. But Prasert was not worried. He had survived worse situations. He followed the direction of the mountain. His compass still worked. His supplies were enough. Everything should have been normal, until he noticed something strange. The forest had become silent, completely silent. No birds calling from the trees, no insects moving through the leaves, no animals running through the undergrowth. Even the wind seemed to have disappeared. Prasert stopped walking. He looked around. Strange. He had spent years in the jungle. He knew that forests were never truly quiet. A living forest always made sounds.
But this place felt like it was holding its breath.
Prasert continued walking. A few minutes passed. Then he heard it. A sound behind him. Thump. He stopped immediately. His hand moved toward his rifle. Slowly, he turned around. Nothing. Only trees. Only shadows. He waited. Experienced hunters knew one thing. When the forest becomes silent, do not rush. Listen. He stayed still for almost a minute. Then he laughed quietly. Probably a fallen branch. He continued walking. 10 minutes later, the sound came again. Thump. This time, it was closer. Prasert stopped. His eyes searched between the trees. Nothing moved. But his instincts changed. A hunter survives because he trusts his instincts. And every instinct inside him was saying, something was watching him.
The sun disappeared behind the mountains. Prasert decided not to continue in the darkness. He built a small, temporary camp beneath a large tree. A small fire, a simple meal, his rifle beside him. The golden pendant remained inside his backpack. He tried not to think about it, but every time he closed his eyes, he remembered the strange carvings on the cave wall, the one-legged figures, the chest, and the feeling that something inside the cave had been waiting.
Midnight arrived. The fire became smaller. The forest was dark. Prasert finally began to fall asleep. Then, a sound woke him. Thump. His eyes opened. He reached for his rifle. Another sound. Thump. Not far away. Slowly, something was moving around his camp. Not walking, not running, jumping. One step at a time. Thump, thump, thump. Prasert stared into the darkness. For the first time in his life, the experienced hunter felt something he had never felt before. Fear. And from somewhere beyond the trees, a strange sound answered. A whisper, almost impossible to hear. Koi. Prasert held his breath, because deep inside the forest, something had found him.
Prasert remained completely still. His fingers tightened around his rifle. The small fire in front of him slowly turned into glowing red embers. The darkness surrounding the camp felt endless. He listened carefully. A normal animal would make noise. A wild boar would move through the bushes. A deer would run when it sensed danger. Even predators left signs of their presence. But whatever was outside was different. It was quiet, patient, almost as if it knew the man inside the camp was afraid. Thump. The sound came again. This time, right behind the trees in front of him. Prasert slowly lifted his flashlight. The beam moved across the darkness. Tree trunks, wet leaves, empty shadows. Nothing. He lowered the light. Then suddenly, something moved. A shadow crossed between the trees. Too fast. Too low. Prasert immediately raised his rifle. But he did not shoot. A true hunter knows fear can make a person kill something they do not understand.
He waited. The forest became silent again. Then, a strange sound came from the darkness. A low, breathing sound. Not like an animal, not like a person. Something between both. Prasert slowly moved his flashlight toward the sound. For a brief moment, the light touched something standing behind a tree. Two pale eyes reflected back, watching him.
Prasert froze. The figure moved away before he could see clearly. But one thing remained in his mind. The movement. It did not walk. It jumped. One powerful movement at a time. Thump, thump, thump. Prasert stayed awake until morning. When the first sunlight entered the forest, he searched the area around his camp. At first, he found nothing. Then he noticed something near the edge of the fire. A mark on the wet ground. A strange footprint. Not the footprint of a human. Not the footprint of an animal. One deep impression. Then another, several meters away, as if something had moved by jumping. Prasert stared at the marks. His mind searched for an explanation. Maybe an unknown animal. Maybe something he had never encountered. Anything, except the answer he refused to accept.
He remembered the stories villagers told him, the stories he laughed at, about a creature hidden deep in the forest, a creature with one leg, a creature that guarded forgotten treasures, a creature that followed those who took what was not theirs. Prasert shook his head. Impossible. He packed his belongings and prepared to leave. But before walking away, he looked back at the forest. For a moment, between the trees, he saw a small figure standing in the mist, watching, waiting. Then the mist moved, and the figure disappeared. Prasert walked away from the place, still refusing to believe, still searching for a logical explanation. But he did not know. The first encounter was not a warning. It was a reminder. The forest had noticed him, and it wanted back what belonged to it.
Prasert walked faster than before. He told himself he was not running, he was simply leaving. A hunter never runs from the forest. A hunter knows when it is time to return. At least, that was what he wanted to believe. The sun moved higher into the sky. The heat returned. The sounds of the jungle slowly came back. Birds, insects, the movement of leaves. Everything looked normal again. But Prasert could not forget what happened during the night. The eyes in the darkness, the strange footprints, the sound of something moving with only one leg. He tried to find an explanation. Maybe an unknown animal, maybe a rare creature he had never seen. There had to be an answer. There had to be.
By late afternoon, the weather changed again. Dark clouds covered the sky. Rain began falling through the trees. Prasert searched for a safe place to rest. He found a large rock formation beside a small stream, a place where he could stay dry until morning. He started a small fire, checked his supplies, and finally allowed himself to rest. The forest was quiet. Too quiet. Midnight arrived. Prasert was half asleep when he felt something, a cold touch, on his foot. His eyes opened instantly. At first, he thought it was a small insect. Then he felt it, a sharp pain, 2 small points pressing into his skin, like 2 needles. Prasert immediately pulled his foot back. He grabbed his flashlight. The beam moved across the ground. Nothing. No snake, no insect, no animal, only darkness. His breathing became heavier. Slowly, he looked down. 2 small wounds appeared on his big toe. A thin line of blood ran down his skin. He touched the wound carefully. It was not like a snake bite. It was not like any injury he had ever seen. The marks were too small, too precise, as if something had intentionally left them there. Prasert looked around the camp. Then he noticed something near the trees, a shadow, standing silently, watching.
His flashlight moved toward it. For a brief moment, he saw a small figure. One leg, long arms, a narrow face. Then it disappeared into the darkness. Prasert grabbed his rifle, but he did not follow. Something inside him told him this was not an attack. It was a warning. The next morning, the pain was gone, almost completely. For a moment, Prasert believed it was nothing, just a strange animal, just bad luck. He packed his things and continued toward the village. But after several hours, something changed.
His body felt heavier. His vision became slightly blurred. A cold feeling moved through his veins. He stopped beside a tree. His hand touched his forehead. Fever. Impossible. He had walked through storms before. He had survived injuries before. But this felt different. As the sun began to disappear, Prasert heard the sound again. Thump. Behind him. He turned. Nothing. Another sound. Thump. Closer. Then a whisper. Soft. Almost like the wind. Koi. For the first time, Prasert did not feel angry. He did not feel curious. He felt something he had never felt in the forest before. Helplessness. Because he finally understood. The creature was not trying to stop him from leaving. It was letting him leave, so that he would carry the mark and remember what he had taken.
After 3 days deep inside the jungle, Prasert finally saw something he had been searching for. Smoke. A thin line of smoke rising above the trees. The village. Civilization. Safety. For the first time in days, he felt relief. He had survived the storm. He had survived the strange sounds. He had survived whatever was following him in the darkness. At least, that was what he believed. As he entered the village, people noticed immediately that something was wrong. Prasert was usually strong, a man who walked through mountains without fear. But this time, his face looked exhausted. His movements were slower. An old villager approached him. "Are you injured?" Prasert shook his head. "Just tired." He smiled. "The forest was harder than I expected." He did not mention the cave. He did not mention the treasure. And he did not mention the thing that followed him. Some experiences are difficult to explain, especially when you are not ready to believe them yourself. That evening, Prasert returned to his small house at the edge of the village. He placed his backpack on the wooden table. For a long time, he simply stared at it. Inside was the golden pendant, the object that started everything. He told himself he would sell it later. Maybe it was worth a lot of money. Maybe this discovery could change his life. He reached for the bag, then stopped. A strange feeling came over him, like someone was watching. He looked toward the window. Nothing. Only the dark forest beyond the village. That night, Prasert could not sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he heard it again. Thump. A single sound, coming from somewhere outside. He sat up immediately. His house was silent. Then, thump. Closer. Prasert reached for his knife. His heart began beating faster. He moved toward the window. Slowly, he looked outside. Nothing. The empty yard, the trees moving slightly in the wind. But then, something caught his attention. On the ground near the doorway were 2 small marks in the dirt. Fresh, like something had stood there, watching his house.
The next morning, Prasert visited the oldest hunter in the village, a man named Somchai. Unlike the others, Somchai did not ask what happened. He simply looked at Prasert. Then he looked down, at his foot. "Show me your foot." Prasert frowned. "Why?" Somchai's expression became serious. "Show me." Slowly, the Sert removed his boot. The old hunter saw the wound. 2 small marks. The skin around them had changed color. Somchai became silent. For several seconds, he said nothing. Then he asked one question, a question that made Prasert's blood run cold. "What did you take from the forest?"
Prasert stared at Somchai. The old hunter's question remained in the air. "What did you take from the forest?" For a moment, Prasert did not answer. He looked away. "I don't know what you're talking about." Somchai did not react. He had spent too many years in the forest to believe every word people said, especially when their eyes told a different story. The old hunter slowly stood up. He walked to a wooden shelf inside his small house. From a dusty box, he took out an old piece of cloth. Carefully, he unfolded it. Inside was an object covered with scratches and age, a small piece of metal. Prasert looked at it. "What is that?" Somchai placed it on the table. "Something I should have left in the forest." Prasert looked at him. The old hunter continued. "Many years ago, before you were born, I was just like you."
Somchai looked through the window toward the mountains. Young, confident, believing that every problem had a logical answer. I thought old stories were created by people who were afraid. Prasert remained silent, because those were exactly the words he had believed. "One rainy season," Somchai continued, "I entered the same forest, and I found a hidden place." His voice became quieter, a place that should have remained hidden. "Like you," Somchai looked at Prasert. "I found something valuable, and I told myself, I will only take one thing, just one." The room became silent. But the forest does not count how much you take. 1 gold coin, or an entire chest. The mistake is the same. Prasert looked down. He knew what Somchai meant, but he still resisted. "So you believe some creature is following me because of a piece of gold?" Somchai looked directly into his eyes. "No, it is not following you because of gold." He paused. "It is following you because you broke a promise." Prasert frowned. "What promise?" Somchai took a deep breath. "The promise every hunter makes when entering the deep forest. Take only what you need, leave everything else behind." The old hunter picked up the old metal object from the table. He turned it over. On its surface were the same markings Prasert had seen inside the cave, the figure of a creature standing on one leg. Prasert's face changed. "You have seen it before," Somchai nodded slowly. "Yes, 30 years ago, and I was lucky enough to survive."
Prasert looked at him carefully. "How?" Somchai was silent for a moment. Then he answered, "Because I returned what I took." Outside, the wind moved through the trees. The leaves whispered softly. Somchai looked toward the forest. "But there is one thing you need to understand, Prasert. That creature, the one people call Concoy, is not hunting you." Prasert looked confused. "Then what is it doing?" The old hunter answered quietly, "It is waiting for you to make the right choice."
That night, Prasert sat alone inside his house. The golden pendant rested on the table in front of him. For the first time,
It no longer looked like treasure. It looked like a mistake. But before he could decide what to do, a sound came from outside. Thump. Prasert slowly turned toward the door. Thump. Closer. And then a quiet whisper. Koi. The forest had followed him home.
That night, Prasert did not sleep. The golden pendant remained on the wooden table in front of him. A small object, something that could fit inside the palm of his hand. Yet somehow, it felt heavier than anything he had ever carried. Outside the house, the village was quiet. Most people had already gone to sleep. The sound of insects filled the night air. Everything appeared normal. But Prasert knew better now. The forest had followed him.
He tried to convince himself that it was impossible. Maybe the fever was affecting his mind. Maybe exhaustion had created fear. Maybe the old stories had planted ideas in his head. He had spent his entire life trusting logic. He was not ready to abandon everything he believed. Not yet. Near midnight, the village became completely silent. Prasert sat beside the window, watching the darkness outside. Then, a sound came from the yard. Thump. His body became tense. He slowly reached for his knife. Another sound. Thump. Closer. Something was moving around his house. Not walking. Jumping. Prasert moved toward the door. His hand touched the wooden handle. Then he stopped. A memory came back. Somchai's words. It is not hunting you. It is waiting for you to make the right choice. He stepped away from the door. The sound outside continued. Thump. Thump. Until finally, silence. The next morning, Prasert woke up feeling worse. His body was heavy. His fever had returned. He looked down. The wound on his toe had changed. The two small marks were darker. The skin around them had become swollen. Strange lines extended beneath his skin, like something spreading slowly through his body. For the first time, Prasert felt real fear. He immediately went to Somchai. The old hunter looked at the wound. He did not seem surprised. It has started. Prasert looked at him. What is happening to me? Somchai prepared herbs and placed them beside him. The mark is not meant to kill you. Then what is it for? The old hunter looked toward the forest. A reminder. A warning. A chance.
Prasert became frustrated. You keep talking like this is some old story. I need a real answer. Somchai looked directly at him. Then here is the real answer. Something in that forest knows you took something, and until you return it, your body will continue carrying the mistake. Prasert looked away. He wanted to deny it. He wanted to laugh. But deep inside, he remembered the cave, the carvings, the footsteps, the eyes watching him, and the small golden pendant sitting on his table. That evening, Prasert finally made his decision. He wrapped the pendant carefully. He packed his supplies. He picked up his rifle. But this time, he was not going into the forest to hunt. He was going back to return what he had taken. Before leaving, Somchai stopped him. Remember one thing. Prasert looked back. The old hunter spoke quietly. Do not enter the forest like a hunter. Enter like a guest. Prasert nodded. Then he walked toward the trees. The same forest that once held a treasure was now waiting for him to bring it back.
The next morning,
Before the sun appeared above the mountains, Prasert stood at the edge of the forest, the same place where he had entered many days before. The trees stood silently in front of him, tall, ancient, unmoving. But this time, the forest felt different. Before, Prasert saw it as a place to conquer, a place where he could hunt, a place where he could find something valuable. Now, he saw it as something much older than himself, something that had existed long before humans walked beneath these trees. Somchai walked beside him. The old hunter carried only a small bag of herbs, no weapon, no tools. Prasert noticed this. "You are not bringing a rifle?" Somchai shook his head. "No." "Why?" The old hunter looked at the forest. "Because we are not going there to fight. We are going there to apologize."
Those words stayed in Prasert's mind. Apologize. A word he never expected to use with a forest. They entered the trees. The deeper they walked, the quieter everything became. The path that Prasert remembered was gone. Trees grew where there had once been an open trail. The river sounded different. Even the mountains seemed unfamiliar. Prasert stopped. "This is the way I came before." Somchai looked around. "Are you sure?" Prasert nodded. "Yes." The old hunter remained silent. Then he said, "The forest does not always show the same path twice." They continued walking. Hours passed. The mark on Prasert's foot became painful again. A burning sensation moved through his body. He stopped and held onto a tree. Somchai looked at him. "It knows we are close." Prasert looked around. "Who?" The old hunter did not answer, because he heard it first.
Thump. Both men froze. The sound came from somewhere ahead, not far away. Thump. Another sound. The trees became silent. Birds stopped singing. The wind disappeared. Prasert's hand moved toward his knife. Somchai stopped him. "Do not raise your weapon." "Why?" The old hunter whispered. "Because it is watching." Slowly, something moved between the trees. A small figure, hidden by mist. Prasert held his breath. The creature stepped forward. For the first time, he saw it clearly. It was smaller than he imagined, but far more terrifying. Its body was thin. Its arms were unusually long. Its skin was rough, like something that had lived beneath the earth for centuries. And beneath its body, there was only one leg. The creature stood silently, watching them, not attacking, not moving closer, just waiting. Prasert felt his fear return. But this time, something else appeared. Understanding. The creature was not a monster searching for blood. It was a guardian, protecting something that humans had taken. Somchai slowly lowered his head. "We have returned." His voice was calm. "We brought back what belongs to the forest." The creature stared at Prasert, at the bag holding the golden pendant. Then it turned away and jumped deeper into the forest. Thump, thump, thump. Somchai looked at Prasert. "Follow." Prasert took a deep breath. Then he followed the creature into the darkness, toward the cave, where everything began. The forest became darker as they moved deeper. Prasert followed the sound. Thump, thump. The creature moved through the trees without making a single unnecessary sound. It was not running away. It was leading them. After what felt like hours, the trees became thinner. The cold air returned. And Prasert recognized the place. The mountain wall. The old rocks covered with moss. The entrance hidden behind the plants. The cave. He stopped. The memory came back immediately. The chest. The golden pendant.
The moment when he chose to take something that was not his. Somchai looked at him. This is where it started. Prasert nodded slowly. They entered the cave.
The darkness surrounded them. Their footsteps echoed through the ancient tunnel. Water dripped from the ceiling. The air smelled old, like a place untouched by humans for many years. Then, the light revealed the carvings on the wall again, but this time, Prasert noticed something he had missed before. The carvings were not showing a monster. They were showing a guardian. The one-legged spirit stood beside the treasure, not as an enemy, but as a protector. Somchai touched the ancient markings. People misunderstood the story. Prasert looked at him. "What do you mean?" The old hunter continued. "They thought this creature wanted gold. They thought it protected treasure because it was greedy." He shook his head. But they were wrong.
Somchai pointed deeper into the cave. The things inside this cave were left here by people who came before us. Objects with memories. Objects connected to the forest. Some were gifts. Some were offerings. Some were things people abandoned when they never returned. Prasert looked at the old chest. For the first time, he did not see wealth. He saw history. He saw the mistakes of people who came before him. The one-legged spirit appeared at the end of the cave, watching silently. Prasert slowly removed the golden pendant from his bag. His hand trembled, not because he was afraid, because he finally understood. This small object had changed everything. It had brought fear. It had brought pain. But the real danger was never the spirit. The real danger was the desire inside humans.
Prasert stepped forward. Slowly. He placed the pendant back inside the chest. The moment it touched the old wood, the cave became completely silent. Then, a strange sound moved through the darkness. Not a threatening sound, almost like a sigh of relief. The creature moved closer. Prasert remained still. The spirit looked at him. For a moment, their eyes met, and Prasert felt something he never expected. The creature was not angry. It was waiting. Waiting for humans to remember an old rule. Take nothing that does not belong to you. The forest had never wanted revenge. It only wanted respect.
The golden pendant was back where it belonged. The cave became silent. For several moments, nobody moved. Prasert waited. He expected something to happen. A roar, an attack, some kind of punishment. But nothing happened. The one-legged spirit simply stood there, watching him. Prasert looked at Somchai. "Is it over?" The old hunter did not answer immediately. He looked deeper into the cave. "Not yet." Prasert frowned. "What else is there?" Somchai pointed toward the darkness behind the old chest. "The forest does not only test what you take, it tests what you are willing to leave behind." Suddenly, the walls of the cave began to shine, not brightly, just enough to reveal what was hidden beyond. A second chamber, a place Prasert had never seen before. Inside were countless treasures, ancient gold, precious stones, old weapons, objects from forgotten generations, more than he could ever imagine. Prasert stood silently. A part of him was amazed. Another part of him was afraid, because he understood this was the real test. The spirit moved aside, allowing him to see everything. It did not block him. It did not threaten him. It simply waited. Somchai whispered, "Now you understand." Prasert looked at him. "Understand what?" The old hunter answered, "The forest could have hidden this from you forever. but it showed you because it wants to know what kind of man you really are. Prasert slowly walked closer. The golden light reflected in his eyes. Years ago, he would have reached for the treasure immediately. He would have thought about money, about a better life, about everything he could buy. But now, he remembered the pain, the fever, the fear, the nights hearing the sound of footsteps outside his home, and he finally understood something. The greatest treasure in the forest was not something humans could carry away. It was the chance to walk out alive.
Prasert stepped back. He lowered his eyes. "I don't want anything." His voice echoed through the cave. "I already took something that was not mine once. I will not make the same mistake again." The cave became silent. Then, the one-legged spirit moved forward. Prasert prepared himself, but the creature did not attack. It reached toward his injured foot. A cold wind moved through the cave. The pain disappeared. The dark marks on his skin slowly faded. Prasert looked down. The wound was gone. After all this time, the mark had never been a curse. It had been a lesson.
The creature stepped backward. The mist slowly surrounded its body. Before disappearing, Prasert heard a quiet sound, not a threat, not anger, a final message. Remember. Then the spirit vanished, leaving only the ancient cave and the two hunters standing in silence. When Prasert walked out of the cave, he was no longer the same man who entered. He entered the forest searching for treasure, but he left with something far more valuable: understanding.
The journey back through the forest was different. The same trees surrounded them. The same mountains stood in the distance. The same rivers flowed beneath the ancient roots. But Prasert no longer felt like he was walking through a dangerous place. He felt like he was walking through a place that had allowed him to leave. For many years, Prasert believed that survival in the forest came from strength, a stronger body, a sharper weapon, better skills. But now he understood something different. The forest did not care how strong a person was. It cared whether that person respected the life around him. Somchai walked quietly beside him. The old hunter noticed the change. The man walking beside him was not the same hunter who had entered the forest days before. Before, Prasert walked directly, always searching, always looking for something valuable. Now, he stopped to observe the trees, the animals, the small details he once ignored.
As they reached the edge of the forest, Prasert stopped. He looked back. Deep between the trees, the darkness remained. The place where the cave was hidden. The place where the one-legged spirit protected its secret. "Do you think anyone will believe us?" Prasert asked. Somchai smiled slightly. "Does it matter?" Prasert remained silent. The old hunter continued. "Some things in this world are not waiting for humans to believe. They simply exist." When they returned to the village, people gathered around them. Everyone wanted to know what happened. Where had they gone? Why did they return without any treasure? Why did Prasert look different? But Prasert only gave a simple answer. "The forest gave me enough."
Slowly, villagers laughed. They thought he was hiding something. Others believed he had simply become afraid. But Somchai said nothing, because he knew some lessons are impossible to explain. They can only be experienced. Months passed. The story slowly became a rumor in the village. Some people said Prasert found a spirit. Others said he was only lost in the forest and imagined everything. Nobody knew the truth, but one thing changed. Prasert never entered the forest the same way again. Before every journey, he would stand at the edge of the trees, lower his head, and quietly say, "I enter as a guest. I leave nothing behind but my footprints."
Years later, younger hunters would sometimes ask him, "Do you believe the stories about the one-legged spirit?" Prasert would always smile. Then he would answer, "I used to think the forest was full of ghosts, but now I think the forest is full of memories." That evening, as the sun disappeared behind the mountains, a strange sound was heard from deep within the jungle, a sound familiar to those who knew the old stories. Thump. A pause. Thump. Somewhere beyond the trees, something continued to protect the forgotten cave, waiting, watching, and reminding humans that some treasures were never meant to be owned.
Years passed. The story of Prasert slowly became a legend. Not a legend written in books, not a story told by famous historians, but a story carried by ordinary people, around small village fires, during long nights beneath the stars, from one generation to the next. Some people believed the story. They believed the forest truly had a guardian, a mysterious creature that protected what humans should not take. Others laughed. They called it an old man's tale, a story created to frighten people away from dangerous places.
And among those who did not believe were 3 young hunters from a nearby village. They had heard the story many times, the story of the hidden cave, the forgotten treasure, and the creature that moved through the forest with only one leg. One evening, one of them laughed beside the fire. "A spirit protecting treasure? If that treasure really exists, why hasn't anyone taken it?" The others laughed. "Maybe because everyone is too scared." An older villager sitting nearby listened quietly. After a long silence, he said, "The forest does not hide things because they are impossible to find. Sometimes it hides them because they are not meant to be found."
The young hunters smiled. They respected the old man, but they did not believe him. The next morning, they entered the forest. They carried supplies, they carried weapons, and they carried the same curiosity that had once led Prasert into danger. For 2 days, they searched. Nothing happened. No strange sounds, no mysterious footprints, no sign of the creature. On the 3rd night, one of them finally spoke. Maybe the story was never true. The others agreed, until the fire suddenly went out. The forest became silent, a silence they had never experienced before. No insects, no wind, no movement. Then, from somewhere beyond the trees, a sound, thump. The young hunters froze. They looked at each other. Another sound, thump, closer. The oldest among them whispered, "Did you hear that?" Nobody answered, because they all heard it. A small shadow moved between the trees, not fast, not hiding, almost as if it wanted them to see. The hunters reached for their weapons, but one of them remembered the old story, the warning, "Do not take what belongs to the forest." They slowly lowered their weapons and waited. The shadow remained there for several seconds, then disappeared into the darkness, leaving only one sound behind. Thump. When the hunters returned to the village, They did not bring treasure. They did not bring proof. They only brought a story. And from that day, they no longer laughed when they heard the name of the one-legged spirit, because they learned something important. A person does not need to understand everything in the world to respect it. Deep inside the ancient forest, the hidden cave remained untouched. The forgotten treasure remained where it belonged, and the guardian of the forest continued watching, waiting for the next person who would enter, not with respect, but with greed.
Many years had passed since that night in the forest. Prasert was no longer the young hunter who walked through the jungle searching for animals. His hair had turned gray, his hands had become weaker, and the mountains he once crossed easily had become memories of another time. But one thing never changed. Every time he looked toward the forest, he remembered the hidden cave, the golden pendant, the creature that walked on one leg, and the lesson the forest had given him. One evening, a group of young hunters came to the village. They had heard many stories about the deep jungle, stories about lost caves, forgotten treasures, and a mysterious creature that protected them.
One of the young men laughed. Old stories are always exaggerated. People create monsters because they are afraid of places they don't understand. The others laughed with him. Prasert listened quietly. Then the young man looked at him. "You lived near this forest your whole life. Do you believe those stories?" Prasert looked toward the trees. The sun was disappearing behind the mountains. The forest was covered in golden light. For a moment, he remembered the night he first heard that sound. Thump. The sound that changed his life forever.
Finally, he smiled. I used to think those stories were impossible. The young hunters listened carefully. I thought spirits were just stories created by people who were afraid. He paused. Until I entered the forest, and the forest answered me. Nobody laughed anymore. Prasert continued. But remember this. The greatest danger in the forest is not always the creature hiding in the darkness. Sometimes, the greatest danger is the greed inside a person's heart. The young hunters became silent because they understood. Prasert was not telling a story about a monster. He was telling a story about humans.
That night, deep inside the mountains, far away from the village lights, the ancient forest remained unchanged. The trees continued to grow, the rivers continued to flow, and somewhere hidden beyond the forgotten paths, the old cave remained untouched. Some people say, the one-legged spirit still protects that place. Some say it was only a legend, a story created to teach people respect for nature. But those who have entered the deepest parts of the forest know one thing.
The jungle keeps many secrets, secrets that humans may never understand. And sometimes, when the night is completely silent, when the wind stops moving, and the trees seem to be watching, a sound can still be heard from far away. Thump, a pause. Thump, a single creature moving through the darkness, protecting what was never meant to be taken, waiting for anyone who enters the forest without respect. Because in the ancient forests of Thailand, not everything that is hidden is waiting to be found.